Hello, everybody. Scott Golden here with the All Star Wrestling Review Series. Starting 1981, January 3rd, 1981 is where we are currently, and certainly looking forward to the foray into 1981, the year of my birth. So, 40 years ago, just celebrated my 40th birthday in the past week or so. So, for those in that decade, it's interesting. But 40 years ago, wrestling looked so much different than it does today, and I would dare say better than it does today. But anyway, Hulk Hogan with Freddie Blassie kicks off the year, defeating Steve King and George Rosario. Handicap match 451, pinning King following a clothesline. Clothesline, pretty big deal for Hogan. Interesting that he would start off 1980 as the main focal point here. Not that I'm terribly surprised, but at the same time, kind of a little bit of an interesting run there as it relates to kind of moving into 1980 as a conceptual thing, or moving into 1981 rather. Anyway, Hogan, very punch kick style, not a big surprise there. Everyone who's ever seen Hulk Hogan knows what he brings to the table. However, I will say during this time period in general, Hogan much more diversified in his offensive moveset than he would become known during the 84 to 96 when he turns heel again. He kind of went through a renaissance 96 on forward for a little while, but again, interesting guy certainly, but also somewhat predictable. Again, with the Technicolor robe and the handicap match. Interesting that they always bring back the handicap match every couple of months as it relates to Hogan and a couple other larger guys. I'm actually a fan of handicap matches when they're done well. When they're done poorly, it actually does less good for the talent than if they just had a regular singles match. In a handicap match, you got to have a guy who doesn't do a lot of selling, and you have to have a guy who's able to kind of diversify against the two individuals who are they're battling. Anyway, Hogan with a couple of shots along the way, and of course then the enhancement talents take a good bit of punishment. Punch kick. Hogan actually uses a guillotine across the top rope. Sends the guy launching over the top, or tries to send the guy launching over the top with the top rope kind of slingshot type maneuver, and then Hogan, of course, as mentioned, wins with the clothesline. Black Demon returns, our masked friend, who is in this particular juncture of things going to do battle once again. Black Demon actually 81 through 83 or thereabouts. Pretty regular character. I don't know who played the Black Demon at the time, but pretty regular character. The new Intercontinental Champion Pedro Morales defeats Black Demon via submission with Boston Crab 701. After the bout, Patterson conducted a ringside interview with the new Intercontinental Champion. They talk about Stan Hansen and other people that may challenge Ken, ultimately overcoming Ken Patera. I don't really understand the psychology behind going back to Pedro as the Intercontinental Champion. I don't know that it advances somebody new. However, perhaps the ethnic makeup of the Northeast at the time, and already enjoying the Latin American flavor as world champion before, might have contributed to the decision here. Anyway, so Morales, punch kick, very basic as always, wearing the Intercontinental Championship. The more I look, the more I realize I enjoy 80s, early 80s and mid 80s belts. I'm not really familiar much with the 70s and 60s championships, but early and mid 80s belts I enjoy a great deal. Arm bars and such into hammer locks and roll throughs by Morales. Morales, of course, wearing orange tights. Interesting that the grayish and black tights or I guess singlet of the Black Demon are very counter balanced by his fuchsia boots. Just a weird thing. Black Demon eventually does come out of this situation and gets a little bit of offensive run there. And again, Pat Patterson does a good job of getting his point across of kind of making Pedro more likable. Maybe you're getting a new cycle of fans through in the early 80s. I don't really know, but really trying to put him forward as a all-around likable guy that's got a bit of a hot temper, so kind of covering both sides of Pedro Morales in the interview is Pat Patterson. And so then we go to a tag team match here. Obviously, tag team action up until, the creation of the Intercontinental Championship in 1979. The World Champion and the Tag Team Champions were all we had, so Tag Team Championships had more value than they ended up having for Vince in the previous years. Here we go to a tag team combination, though, of, in this case, the Moondogs with Captain Lou Albano defeating Dominic DeNucci and Angelo Gomez 7-13 when King pins Gomez after a splash. Dominic DeNucci being in there with Gomez, and also Dominic DeNucci being involved in such a decisive loss is kind of an interesting, I don't know that I would say necessarily managerial sort of maneuvering or whatever, but it's there. Again, 7-13 might be too long for the match as DeNucci kind of stand and brawl style of talent. I don't know that translates. Well, I mean, it does translate with the Moondogs because they don't really do much else themselves other than stand and brawl. So maybe the idea is to give DeNucci a guy who has had a major force in the WWF throughout the 70s. A kind of a good run, a good feel, whatever have you. But anyway, DeNucci stands in and does the majority of the brawling, punch kick style, mainly forearms, double chops to the top of the head, and that. And again, the splash on Gomez when the Moondogs finally do get the victory is the main portion of things here. We move on to another match in the series on the program, which happens to be, in this particular case, the tag team champions, Tony Garea, Rick Martel defeating Ron Shaw and Baron Mikel Cicluna 8:41 when Shaw submits to the leg lock from Garea. Garea and Martel obviously going for the younger, youthful-ish, you know, tag team that's based on teaming. Again, Martel had been named the 1980 Wrestler of the Year by All Japan. Why they bring Japan into it, I don't really know, in the sense of it just seems like an oddity. But anyway, takedowns by Shaw. Shaw looks to be a large enough guy that he could have done more. Doesn't really end up. Baron Mikel Cicluna, of course, has been a major star throughout the 50s, 60s, and 70s to this point, so that's kind of there. Takeovers by Garea. Garea tries to get more wrestling and work holds a little longer than Martel does. Martel seems to be bursts of small energy, things like drop kicks and other things. Not that he doesn't work holds, but certainly the nature of the slower pace is Garea, although Martel comes in with the sunset flip and other, for the time, inventive moves. And then you see Garea work over the leg of his opponent several minutes and finally get a modified leg lock submission. Ultimately, kind of almost like a Scorpion Deathlock or Indian Deathlock type maneuver, and gets a submission. Having the champions win by submission once in a while, I think, is good for business, because it means that anything can happen and weaknesses do happen in the course of matches. Then we move to the final match of the day, which in this case is Killer Khan with Fred Blassie defeating John Calhoun 238 with a jumping knee drop. Khan still being protected, not really having that many larger matches on television. Not that you'd expect him to have them, but still kind of just there as a teaser. Punch kick, and ultimately we go in the direction of body slams and then chokeouts by Khan. Khan also using the punch kick mentality and double chops, and finally that top rope knee drop. Again, moving towards his deal with Andre the Giant as we start 1981. We will be back with more right after this.